You're listening to Colin Flaherty on the Don't Make the Black Kids Angry podcast. Come to think of it, I think that's probably what I should have been listening to this morning instead of NPR. You know, for somebody who's written two best-selling books, White Girl Bleed a Lot and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, on racial violence and media, my books get listed not just in the African. My books are bestsellers in the African American Studies category, but they're also listed as bestsellers on Amazon in the Media Studies category. It's because we spend so much time talking about reporters. So for somebody who's apparently makes a living keeping an eye on these clowns and how they're in such denial, deceit, and delusion, I find myself listening and consuming a lot less popular media, especially news stuff. I think I can get away with that because, well, at least consuming on my own, I can get away with it because lots and lots of people send me stories. They send me links, and so it's kind of like what I need to see, I see. But I still dip into the waters occasionally with Fox News, or if I'm in my car and I've been listening to a book for an hour. That's what I consume now. Instead of radio or TV or news, I listen to audiobooks. More on that in a minute. But if I'm between chapters on an audiobook, I'll turn on NPR. Or I'll turn on Rush. I still enjoy listening to Rush. Don't get a chance to listen to them as much as I want to. But for as little as I listen to NPR, every time I turn it on, they're saying something crazy. They're saying something astonishingly uninformed. I almost said stupid. They're saying something astonishingly uninformed. And it happened again this morning. I woke up, my book was done. There was the show, All Things Considered. Of course, isn't it amazing how little self-awareness the folks have at NPR? They're sitting there titling their shows Fresh Air, All Things Considered, when they haven't had a new point of view in Fresh Air in 25 years. It's the same show, same point of view. Ditto for All Things Considered. Yeah, they cover the entire range of subjects from A to B. So anyway, I forget what they were talking about this morning. They were talking something to do with New York City, and they went off on a tangent like I'm going off on a tangent right now. They said something like 80% of the people in New York who get tickets who are arrested for pot or some other drugs are black or Hispanic. And that's wildly out of proportion compared to the number of white people who live in New York City. Okay, here comes the astonishingly uninformed part. Then he said, studies show that black people and white people use the same amount of drugs, and so to have this disparity could only mean one thing only: racial discrimination, racial whatever, bad things. And proponents of this are using this as an argument in favor of legalizing marijuana. Okay, I don't care about pot. I'm amazed how many people on this who watch these videos do smoke pot, because whenever you say something against pot, that like virtually everybody in the videos that we see, they're on drugs, they're smoking a lot of pot. We get a lot of pushback on that. I'm not overly worried about it. But then he said, yes, studies show that black people and white people use the same amount of pot. It's not the first time I heard this. And I wrote about this extensively. Everything you hear now I've kind of covered in Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. I really wrote about it extensively there because I was very curious about these studies. The first time I heard that claim, it was like, okay. What's the glaring thing there? the glaring thing is, well, how do we know if somebody smokes pot or not? So I thought, okay, I'm curious. How do we know? So I started looking it up, and I finally found one story where it made this claim, and it said, according to the census, I think it's called the Household Survey or something. Got the full title in my book. But what it is the Census Department gives us a number. I call it the super census. Every 10 years, they go around, they give the census out. We all fill it out, how many people are here, whatever numbers are in there. I even forget what's in the census these days. But they select 3,000, 4,000 people just for some additional research at random. And that is at random. That's as close to random as you're going to get in social sciences, the number of people they select for the super survey. And then they give them like a 45, they go to your house. They give you like a 45-minute, interview. And one of the things they ask you the drug question. Do you use drugs? And that's where the biggest piece of misinformation floating around our newsrooms comes from, right there, because the Census Department tells us, based on their interviews, that black people and white people are using the same amount of drugs and the same amount of frequency. They're just using the same amount. They just use the same. And even before here's how they do it. Here's how they do it. It's called self-reporting. They ask. That's how they tell. They ask. So it's like they come into my house. Hey, Colin, you use drugs? No. You ever used drugs? No. You ever been drunk? No. Ever got into a fight? No. Ever lied? No. Ever done anything you're not 100% proud of? Oh, hell no. That's how it rolls when you ask people questions about their misbehavior. And it turns out there's a lot of studies done on self-reporting. Again, we get into this a lot in detail and don't make the black kids angry. Yeah, because people were going, well, how can we tell if you're telling the truth? NPR actually had a big study on self-reporting. Except they were talking about people who go to church. So they do all these studies where they report these incredible numbers of people going to church, right? 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50%. Oh yeah, I go to church every week. Well, they went to the pastors and they go, hey, how many people go to church in this country? Half? They go, oh no. If half the people went to church, we'd have 2 or 3 services and lines out the door. Way less than that. So you have all these people, for whatever reason, they're telling us that, they go to church, but they're not really going. I think they even gave people a questionnaire, and they even kind of followed them around on Sunday to see if they went to church. And an enormous number of people were just, well, let's just say they weren't being honest with us or with themselves when they reported on their church attendance. That's self-reporting. But when this field of self-reporting really expands, really explodes, is when you get into self-reporting crime and drug use. Because everybody's interested in, that's really the only place where you get these numbers on drug use, right? It's like self-reporting from the Census Department. So is that number any good? Well, let's check it. So I talked about 3 or 4 studies in my book where they talked about this. In Baltimore, they did some kind of study on hypertension where it involved taking a blood sample. So they had the blood work. So they already knew the answers to the questions. And this was a bunch of black people. They were doing studies on hypertension in black people in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins University. They said, using any pot, using any of this, using any of that. Guys are going, hell no, not. Why do you think I'm using that stuff? But they already had the blood work. And whatever the answers were, say the answers were X. The real answers were 6 times X. 6 times the number of people were using drugs as they reported using drugs. And then the Journal of Addictive Behaviors had the same kind of report, same kind of thing. They went and asked a whole bunch of people if you were using drugs, and they had a way to test them. I don't know if they knew they were being tested or not, but they tested them. And here's where it gets, here's one of these things that if I were saying this on video, I would have to go look this up and reproduce it on video because I wouldn't expect anybody to believe me. So you can look it up if you like, because it's in my book. When the scientists say the biggest predictor of whether somebody lies on self-reporting tests about drugs, the biggest indicator is whether they are African American. And the difference between black people and white people on self-reporting tests is enormous. Another indicator is time in prison. If you've recently been out of prison, you're also going to lie your butt off, just the way I was lying my butt off a few minutes ago. And so that's the lie. Okay, I'll just call it. That's the lie. That's the lie that is spread. Because this lie has kind of like spilled over into lots of other areas besides drugs. And by the way, this gets enormous credibility in other circles. We did a story a year or so ago with Attorney General Loretta Lynch. She was at a meeting of the Black Caucus, and the Black Caucus brought in a couple of professors, a couple of activists, and they were all repeating this lie, except they were extending it out past the drug use. It's bad enough when you say it's black people and white people use the same amount of drugs. They were expanding it into a whole new field where they say black people and white people commit the same amount of crimes, but because of over-policing, but because we send cops into black neighborhoods, that's the only reason more black people are arrested, charged, tried, convicted, sent to prison. And when they get out of prison, go right back in. Over-policing. I think I have an audio from a local Wilmington minister saying the exact same thing on a TV show sponsored by the city of Wilmington.
I think it's also important, I think everybody would agree, that if white communities were policed in the same way black communities were policed, you'd have a high rate of crime in white communities too. If white communities were policed in the same way black communities were policed, you'd have a high rate of crime in white communities too.
So I knew the guy that was moderating the show. He let him say that without pushback. This minister was up there. This black minister was saying it. He had two kids sitting next to him, and they weren't just saying that. They were going the whole gamut, right? It's like, yeah, down at Delaware State University, a black college. They said, yeah, they're always saying the kids down there are getting in trouble. Well, it's only because the cops are hassling the kids. The moderator, John Rago, was sitting there just shaking his head. I know John Rago. Yeah, uh-huh. Oh, yeah, that's terrible. The kids are eating it up. Oh, yeah. Black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why cops are always picking on black people for no reason whatsoever, and why they're letting white people get away with the exact same thing. And that's what everybody was talking about at this seminar put on by the Black Caucus. That's what Loretta Lynch, she was talking about a version of it. She got up there and gave her little speech while all the other guys were talking about black victimization. Loretta got up there and, in these situations, you always kind of want to, you always try to want to be the biggest victim in the room or the biggest hero in the room. And since she was the Attorney General, she got to be the biggest hero of all time in the room, and nobody was going to try to top this. So she gets up there and talks about how when she was a child, I want to say this was in the early 60s, her grandfather used to hide black criminals, black convicts who were wanted for other crimes in her county. I think she lived on a farm in North Carolina. I think he was a preacher. And she was very proud of how the cops would knock on the door. Boom, boom, boom. Hey, have you seen, Rufus T. Firefly around here? He's a wanted man. He's dangerous. He committed some crimes. The minister, Loretta's grandfather, would go, no, I haven't seen him. The guy's downstairs in the basement having eating bacon and eggs and grits or whatever they eat down in the South these days. So Loretta came out with the conclusion, which was made everybody in this room of black elected officials ecstatic, which is everybody knows that there was no justice in North Carolina in 1961. And because of bogus studies like this, because of bogus radio reporters like that guy from NPR, that's a national show, by the way. I mean, people are still spreading this fairy tale around. Yeah, black people and white people commit the same amount of crime, except black people get caught, white people don't. Every time I hear somebody say that, I'm always kind of wondering, like, okay, where are the bodies? Where are the victims? Where are the witnesses? Where are the 911 calls? Where are the police reports? Where are the neighbors going, hey, how come these white people are just ruining this neighborhood and we keep calling the cops, but the cops show up and the cops keep saying, oh, were they white? Oh, okay. Why didn't you just tell us that on the phone? You could have saved us a trip. We don't arrest white people for felonies in this county. That's the way the world works now. It does according to NPR. And so this lie spreads all over the place. I'll tell you, one of the places it spread the most is into schools, school districts. We haven't talked enough about Courageous Conversations lately. That book cost me $90, so I read it a couple times. I marked it all up, so we might as well get some use out of it. So Courageous Conversations is written by a guy named Dr. Glenn Singleton, a black man. Well, Dr. Singleton has a business called, I think it's called the Pacific Educational Group, PEG, and they go around the country teaching teachers how to teach black students, mostly white teachers. Lots and lots of new teachers. And, of course, Glenn Singleton knows that black people have been the victims of relentless white racism for a long time, especially in schools, and the only way we're going to solve that is getting more black teachers. The only way we're going to solve that is by doing lots of black history, lots of racial resentment, lots of fairy tales about that create racial hostility, institutional racial hostility. There's one place in the book where Singleton recounts a conversation he had with a mother, maybe a teacher's assistant, who was down with the cause. And she came up to him after the seminar and very shyly said, well, Dr. Singleton, hemming and hawing. Dr. Singleton, well, I've noticed that the kids in my class, well, they're a little bit, she's looking around, looking for some help. No help. They're a little bit rambunctious. And Singleton knows exactly what's going on, but he thinks this is a teachable moment to let her string herself out in her discomfort. So Singleton says, well, that's not the right question to ask. The question to ask is not whether black people are always fighting in school or are violent in school. The question we ask is, why have white people been violent towards black people for the last 4 million years? That's the question you have to answer. Everybody around shakes their head. Yes, that's why he's the man. That's why he has this enormous company. That's why he teaches in hundreds and hundreds of school districts all over the country this song and dance of racial victimization. I mean, he's He's the living embodiment of critical race theory. I don't like to tell you when I'm using critical race theory. I don't want your eyes to glaze over. But whenever you hear me say black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere, that explains everything. That's critical race theory. Derek Bell is given credit for inventing that. You know, Obama's buddy, the professor at Harvard, law professor at Harvard. Lots of places on NPR, PBS, where you can see him in discussion explaining this in some detail. And so Derek Bell is like the Pied Piper, and he's running around the country explaining to this why the black people are not responsible for their own behavior in schools. It's really the teachers who are picking on the students. Oh, and by the way, we covered this ground pretty in lots of detail, and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry as well. If you're one of those teachers, maybe you've been there 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and Glenn Singleton is looking at you and explaining to you what a courageous conversation is. It's not really a conversation, it's a monologue. Because the conversation is, he points his finger at everybody in the room and says, we have to have a courageous conversation, and you have to be courageous enough to admit that your white racism is responsible for this enormous amount of black dysfunction in schools. Your white racism is the reason why black kids aren't performing academically in schools. Your white racism is the reason why in Baltimore, 16 high schools, black high schools, there's not one person who even cared enough to cheat on this test. There's not one person who can read, write, or do math above a third grade level. 16. I think that's isolated to Baltimore. Anyway, so there's teachers and there's always one guy in the back, maybe two, maybe it's a woman, quite innocently. They think we're going to have a conversation. They think we're going to have an open dialogue. That's part of the biggest lie of our generation, the hoax of black victimization. They raise their hand again very sheepishly. Hey, Dr. Singleton, or whenever his stooges or satraps that are running the seminar. Doctor, I've been a teacher for 15 years, and I've done this for black people. I've done that for black people. I bought them pencils, bought them lunch, give them rides to and from school. Go to their mom, even their mom cusses me out every time I get near the house. So I really don't feel like it's fair for you to call me a racist. Got tons of letters from teachers who said that version of the story, and their contracts do not get renewed at the end of the year, if not before then. Dr. Singleton's not playing games in this classroom. Flash forward a couple years from when Singleton first began to the middle of the Obama administration. It really began in the beginning of the Obama administration, but they kind of formalized it a few years in when Obama issued his executive order on excellence in African American education. And he went over all the things in Glenn Singleton's courageous conversations point for point. How black people are disciplined too much. How they don't get good enough grades. And it's all for the same reason. White racism, because there cannot be any difference between white children and black children in school, can there? Oh, you're going to be the teacher that stands up and says there's a big difference? You know, wouldn't it be some kind of miracle if there were not a difference? Okay, think of any indicator of dysfunction on a personal or on a wider level. I mean, start with health. AIDS, hepatitis, drug use, alcoholism, diabetes, obesity, all these other lifestyle diseases. Off the charts, black versus white. And you think about the single parenthood You think about how that decimates a person's chances for success, how that's wildly out of proportion. And now we have people like Glenn Singleton and Obama and other people and NPR. They're trying to tell us that when these children get to school, it's all a blank slate and everybody's equal. Everybody has the same chance to learn and we can expect the same outcomes from people. Why don't we set the stage for this for a story, with a story that just happened the other day. They had to put a 7-year-old black person in handcuffs because he attacked the teacher and wouldn't stop, and it wasn't the first time.
Cuffed like a criminal. It all started with a 7-year-old getting upset with the teacher over his lunch and ended with the student taken into custody in handcuffs. Thank you and good evening to you for joining us tonight. I'm Jawan Strader. Tonight, that young boy's parents are outraged and demanding answers. NBC6 reporter Jamie Garola spoke to the father, all new at 11 o'clock, and joins us tonight with what he had to say. Jamie.
Well, the father admits his son did wrong, but he's also upset that his son was taken away in handcuffs and that he was involuntarily committed. This little boy, just 7 years old, in handcuffs, allegedly just attacked a teacher at Coralway Elementary. But tonight, his father is protesting how police handled the incident.
Still suffering. This is insane. This is something that really affects our family, our friends.
According to a report obtained by NBC6, the 7-year-old was upset at a teacher who told him to stop playing with his food. The kid attacked her by repeatedly punching her on her back. It goes on to say once the teacher restrained the juvenile from attacking her, the juvenile continued to fight with his fists and legs, falling to the ground and grabbing her hair.
No, I know he did wrong, and he will be punished for what he did. Okay, but what the police officer did afterward, this is out of hands. This is unbelievable.
The dad does not defend his kid, but he is upset. An officer put him in handcuffs.
They say they will either Bakerat or arrest my boy. And I asked him, this is 7 years old, why you have to arrest my boy?
Baker Act means involuntarily commit for a mental health exam. The report says the father agreed that the student needed to go. Officials say when they put the kid in handcuffs, they were following protocol.
There's something wrong in this case. I'm not trying to hide or say, well, my kid did something. No, I know he did wrong.
And the child allegedly has done this before. Just last year, police say they have this incident on camera. They also say that the teacher will be okay, although she did complain about some back pain. Reporting live tonight in Miami, Jamie Garola, NBC6 News.
So if you didn't put him in handcuffs, how else are we going to restrain that person? The person that was just attacking the teacher. How are we going to do that? Kid doesn't have any issues. If you ask a teacher about this enormous level of difference in the classroom just on behavior, and how many, don't ask a teacher, ask us, how many videos have we done on it here? How many videos have we done on YouTube? By the way, if you want to see all my videos, the best place to do it until I figure out a way to post them online somewhere else, there's lots and lots of them on YouTube, but the best place is to go to my Facebook page. If you go to Facebook, facebook.com/WGBleedALot, you'll see on the left, you'll see lots of choices, lots of columns. Look for video. Click on video. As soon as that comes up, you go search. Just put the word school in there. You're going to get over 100 videos, each one worse than the last, where it's going to show this enormous amount of black misbehavior, violence, even criminality in schools. We're going to see, we're going to see behavior towards students, black students, Hispanic students, Asian students, white students. We're going to see violence on the way to school. We're going to see violence on the way home. We're going to see violence directed at the neighbors. The one case I keep thinking of is that story from Baltimore. It happened the night before the Baltimore riots. And this was my big test. I wanted to see how many members of the national media could go to Baltimore and talk about the relentless white racism causing everybody in Baltimore to riot. I wanted to see how many of them could be in that town and ignore that story about how 20 kids, 20 black people are in the street, they're fighting, they're jumping on this guy's car, they're on his front lawn, this old dude, 50-something, early 60s, comes out and he goes, "Hey, do you guys mind, if you fight somewhere else?" They attacked him and almost killed him on video. You think he's the only one in America? How many stories have we done on teachers? I'm thinking of the video from St. Louis now, where the teachers in St. Louis are talking in detail about the students that use perfume as like a mace, the vulgarity, the obscenity, the threats, the violence in the classroom, which is a daily thing. Directed at the teachers, directed at other students. God help you if you're a student with a learning disability, like if you have a genuine disability, like you're autistic, if you're handicapped in any way, and you're in one of those schools, a black school, a school with lots of black people in it, you're in serious trouble. I don't know why more parents don't recognize that sending white kids to a black school is child abuse. Don't know why. I don't know why we never get teachers coming to this channel going, "Hey, Colin, I teach in a black school and you got it all wrong." No, what I get is hundreds of letters from teachers going, "Colin, no. You don't know 1% of it."
Down to attend, they sign on to develop young minds. But lately, teachers are finding themselves under attack.
The students they are serving are in many cases turning on them in violence. Tonight, a look at a troubling trend behind the schoolhouse doors. Here's WREG On Your Side investigator April Thompson.
He's just a different type of child.
I've never seen so many disrespectful, defiant children in my life.
Angry children that don't fear authority.
Behind the books and lesson plans is a fear among teachers.
Because of the stress, because of the exhaustion, I started having migraine headaches.
It's not the workload, but something many never expected and are only willing to talk about with their identities hidden. They're students, kids, who instead of obeying authority are constantly challenging it, violently.
Today, one of my colleagues was pushed by a student, and then the teacher assistant was pushed by the student again.
It's happening in classrooms across Shelby County. WREG investigators got a list of teachers attacked by their students in 2013 and 2014. A laundry list of shocking incidents where students kicked, punched, and grabbed teachers by the neck inside schools. This former Booker T. Washington High School teacher says students attacked him 3 times this school year. In September, a student he was taking to the office threw a glass mug at him.
And he steps away from me and he hurls it at me, at my face. And I threw my hand up and it hit the tip of my finger.
The teacher went to the doctor. A month later, the same teacher was jumped again by a student and his cousin after trying to take the student to the office.
They both jumped me, and my first swing, and I was like, wait, you're not supposed to hit these kids, but you're supposed to protect yourself. So it's a double-edged sword when you're a teacher.
The teacher ended up with a torn rotator cuff. The last straw this past November when he told a disruptive student to leave the classroom.
He walks towards the door, then he comes right at me and throws an elbow at me and pushes me up against the wall with the principal sitting there. I tried to go back and teach, but this was the 3rd time, and I said, you know what, I can't do this.
The teachers' union says it's getting to be too much.
In my 41 years of teaching, I have not seen such an avalanche of bad behavior, disrespectful behavior, mob-like behavior of children in schools. It is to the point of teachers are leaving this profession in groves.
We asked Shelby County School Superintendent Dorsey Hobson about the teacher assaults.
The report may say an assault on the teacher, and that could be anywhere from a spitball to somebody bumping into a teacher. But obviously, when there are serious instances involving teacher safety, we're responsive.
But it's more than a spitball, and it may happen more than you know. When we asked Shelby County Schools for a list of all teachers assaulted by students in the last 2 years, they didn't include any mention of the teacher who was attacked 3 times, even though we found police reports filed on his assault. Teachers tell us they are at the breaking point. Listen to how this second grade teacher describes her defiant 7- and 8-year-olds who throw chairs at, push, and kick teachers.
They're violent, either vocal, or if not vocal, they will hit you or they will say ugly things that you'll hear adults saying on the street.
At Colonial Middle School last year, a teacher was pushed and hit by a student after telling the student to sit down. The student began yelling the F word and threatened his gang was coming to the school to F them up. Officers later found a gang letter in the student's folder. Teachers say they need help, and violent students who sometimes are on medication or have special needs may require specialists.
And that's why, we've asked the County Commission this year for a small investment really around some of these issues, social workers, guidance counselors, to try to get at the root cause and address some of these very serious issues.
The teachers who talk with us admit there are plenty of good students, but those who go to the extreme put everyone in jeopardy. The school superintendent says the system also hopes to get more funding so the grievance department, where teachers can turn for help, can be restored.
Thinking of the story in Baltimore. 4 teachers are attacked every day in the Baltimore school system. 4 a day. 4 every day. And they went and found a couple of them. I've seen people I've just seen people that were in, a week ago were breaking down doors in Iraq. Or even a week, maybe a little bit older than that. A couple of weeks before that, they had been running through the jungles of Vietnam. Maybe it was going to take them a little time to adjust here. I've never seen a teacher that was I've never seen a person as shell-shocked as the teachers and the white teachers in the Baltimore school system who are victims of irregular black violence.
There are some of you who will stay up worried tonight, not because of the weather, but because of what will happen tomorrow.
Inside the classroom, we're about to show you the numbers that you really don't want to see.
When it comes to our schools, we are quick to tell you how students are victims of bullying, fights, even guns.
But in the past 5 years, an average of 4 school personnel in Baltimore City schools is the target of an assault. That's 4 a day.
ABC 2 News investigator Brian Kubler peels back that number and shows us a problem. Many school security experts say it's a very real issue. We're not talking about it until tonight.
We first showed you this video back in November. Students at Digital Harbor High School in Federal Hill taunting, bullying, assaulting a substitute teacher at the front of the classroom. Taken with a student's cell phone, this video pulls back the curtain on an issue many simply don't want or won't talk about.
Tremendous amount of stress and anxiety, trying to come up. It's like literally I have to force myself out the door.
Baltimore City school teacher Jeffrey Slattery wants to talk about it because he still literally feels it. It was December 2010 at Baltimore Community High School on the east side when he stopped a student without a hall pass. The student got physical and Slattery let him go.
He walked down the hallway. I turned around to go back to my classroom. He came up from behind me. And, once I was on the ground and, he's basically standing on top of me and he struck me multiple times. When my jaw broke, I went unconscious and I really don't remember anything after that.
He would later learn it took 4 teachers to pull that student off him. Slattery broke his jaw, wired shut for weeks. He pressed charges and the student was convicted. Slattery's assault by a student was just one of 700 that school year in Baltimore City Public Schools, where its own data shows an average of 4 school personnel were assaulted each day in 2010. That average holds true through the past 5 school years, with a total of nearly 4,000 assaults by students on personnel, with noticeable increases in the last 2 years. Broken down by grade level, it's evident 7th, 8th, and 9th graders commit the assaults more often.
Do those numbers shock you?
No. As a matter of fact,
I'm very surprised that they're that low.
Marietta English is the president of the Teachers Union in Baltimore City. It was after this attack on city art teacher Jolita Berry in 2008 when assaults by students raced to the top of mind for most educators. The story went national, fueled by this video posted to MySpace back then. It was the impetus for the union to start keeping its own records by imploring teachers to fill out this form reporting abuse, documentation to lobby for more support to stem this violent tide.
They should not come to work fearing that they're going to be attacked. They should not come to work feeling that they're going to be verbally abused. This is not what we should be coming to work and have to face on a daily basis.
The reality of it is they do, though.
That's the reality of it. Unfortunately, yes.
Now, it's very important to note that City Schools defines an assault as the act of simply touching any school personnel. But as we've shown you, some of the instances can be quite severe. Either way, the administration says any case of this is totally unacceptable and launched a program just last year to turn these stats upside down.
We're faced with children right now who have problems that are none that you could really even imagine. And to treat them just like we treated children in the 1950s is not the appropriate response.
So Karen Weber-Indoor came up with a different approach. Borrowing from her experience turning around schools in the city system as a principal, she is now the executive director of student support and safety. In this position for only a year, she decided to focus on what she calls school climate. Change the perception, feel, and environment of a school, change behavior. A core element of this approach is no longer just teaching the material, but training teachers to relate with the students.
As we saw the suspension numbers begin to creep up, we realized that we had to do some different messaging to the adults in the building because we're the ones who are in control of what happens in the environment. And as soon as we give that control over to children, well, you've got a problem.
It's a problem experts we spoke to say is nationwide and by no means unique to Baltimore City. But Weber-Indoor's approach is, already having worked with 32 schools last summer and is set to work with 32 more this year. Her confidence buoyed by already beginning to see what she called a drastic decrease in suspensions in that pilot group of schools.
So the messages can be articulated to the adults, and adults can be coached in how to have relationships with children. And that's what we're doing as a district.
The results of which are beginning to garner attention from other school districts around the country, but an impact for some here at home that cannot come soon enough.
I feel that in the long run, I don't know how much longer I can be a teacher.
But Jeffrey Slattery doesn't want to quit. He went back to teaching in the city school system just this year. Now diagnosed with a moderate form of post-traumatic stress disorder because of his attack, it is a struggle.
There are days I just shut the lights off, lock my door if I don't have any immediate obligations like a parent conference or a team meeting or something of that nature. And I just sit in my office and I just weep, praying to God that I have the strength to go through the rest of the afternoon. You know, and by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I have nothing left to give anybody.
I'm not going to sugarcoat my reaction to this. That sounds horrible.
Oh, it is. It's not an easy life. But the thing is,
Why do it?
Because I love what I do.
A dedication to his profession and his students, in spite of being on the severe end of a troubling statistic. In Baltimore, Brian Kubler, ABC 2 News.
St. Louis, like 40% of the teachers, the new teachers in St. Louis quit within a couple days. They have no idea what they were getting themselves into. And how many stories have we done lately that mirror what we did in Ballou High School? It was a year, almost, what was it? It was 15 months ago in Ballou. It was September 2016. The principal and the people at Ballou High School made a big deal about the fact that they're going to graduate 100% of the students, and 100% of the students are going to go to college, get accepted to college. If you look at the picture of Ballou, I mean, this is a gleaming new building with all the bells and whistles. This is the model of how it's all supposed to be. And this principal was gonna, you could see her on TV. She was kind of crying about it. That was her like thing, how important it was for her to get black people out of high school and into college. 9 months later, oh yeah, 100% this, 100% that, on the radio, on TV, on black websites, everybody was ecstatic. Everybody knew that all we need is the resources. All we need is a little determination. We need the right people running these schools, get rid of the white people running and put black people in there, and we can have, and that's why there's so much black dysfunction in these schools. 3-4 months later, to NPR's credit, they kind of figured out what was easy enough to find anyway on lots of websites, including one called greatschools.org. NPR came in and said, oh yeah, all those people you graduated, yeah, like most of them shouldn't have graduated because they didn't pass this test. They didn't actually even go to school. They can't read or they can't write. And it was all one big fraud. Then all of a sudden, we start seeing it happen in Memphis, happened in Chicago. Then all of a sudden, everybody remembered what happened in Atlanta, where the teachers were in the room giving the black students answers to standardized tests. It's a hot chocolate mess out there. And the reaction to this hot chocolate educational tsunami among black students and black schools, what we're getting, we've had a dozen of these stories in the last couple of weeks. I've run a couple on my minds.com/Colin Flaherty site. Easy enough to find. I'm looking at one now from Chandler, Arizona. Parents accuse Chandler Unified School District of racism at school board meeting. Well, we know the reason why there's racism is because, well, there's a big difference between black students and white students when it comes to discipline. Let me read you a couple lines of this. But what wasn't on the agenda were several accusations of racism levied by the parents and an ACLU representative against the district. In your high schools, African American students are 2.3 times more likely to receive a suspension, an in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, than their white peers, said Luis Avila, a campaign manager for #DemandToLearn, an ACLU campaign. My son, previously your black student, was suspended from Chandler Unified School District for a year, said Felicia Gillespie, the mother of Nathaniel Thomas. He's being tried as an adult in the Hamilton High School hazing scandal. And this went on and on and on, and everybody just brings these numbers out because nobody wants to challenge the numbers. Oh yeah, there's 2.3 more black people being suspended than white people. Well, that's only one reason only. White racism, because how could there be a difference in behavior between black people and white people? I mean, I just listened to NPR this morning. I listened to Loretta Lynch. They said studies show that when you use drugs, black people and white people use drugs the same amount. The ministers are saying black people and white people commit the same amount of crime. It's just the cops pick on black people, not white people. I mean, this is just like, this is a bottomless pool. It's a bottomless pool of denial, deceit, and delusion. Why don't we head over to North Carolina? Same story. It's almost the same day. Headline. Report shows Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and Durham school suspensions in black and white. Durham Public Schools and Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools are both struggling to reduce suspensions among black students. So we've seen this story. I mean, how many times have we seen this story? 1 billion, right? Let me read a few lines of it. Black students in the Chapel Hill City Schools during 2015-16 school year were 10 times more likely than white students to get a short-term suspension, according to a report released this month. While black students were only 11% of the district's enrollment, they received 51% of the short-term suspensions, compared to 23% for white students, who made up half of the enrollment. Hispanic students were suspended in about the same amount as their population. And of course, all the, they brought out all the school officials. They brought out all the community organizers. And they're, Kevin Bullock, the school district's director of equity affairs, said raising awareness is the first step to bringing about change. The Youth Justice Project acknowledged that districts are trying various strategies to ensure fairness and discipline. And they then, once they get this squared away, they want to start having conversations about student-to-prison pipeline. There are schools and districts across the state making efforts to dismantle this pipeline. However, using bold action, unless bold action is taken to devote funding, resources, and political will toward solving the problem, we will continue to see students of color left behind. But you got all these guys from the ACLU, you got all these parents, you got all these people who are not actually in the classroom. Where are the teachers? Why couldn't they get a teacher to stand up and say the same thing? Should be easy. There's enough of them, black and white. One of my favorite stories about white teachers and black students is a black student was using a phone during class. Teacher went up, took it away from him, said, "You can have this back after class." This is in Connecticut. This is in Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, including a link to the video I'm about to tell you. The student gets up on video, picks up a desk, and throws it at the teacher. Teacher goes down to the principal and says, "Hey, this guy's beating me up. He's assaulting me." She thinks the army is going to come in and rescue her. No, what happened is they fired her. They fired her because she could not control her classroom. How many stories have we seen like that? A ton. How many stories of little old, these little old, they're younger than me, 50, 55, 60-year-old women in classroom trying to talk some sense into a black student. The black student stands up and punches her in the face. How many videos have we seen like that? Whole lot. Easy to find. But yet we look in the newspapers and we don't see one person. We don't see one person pushing back in any of these dozens of articles at these dozens of school districts, hundreds of school districts around the country. They're all doing the same story. They're all doing the same drill now, right? It's like, okay, we got to take the numbers to the school board and tell them that it's their fault black students don't study and misbehave in class. And not one reporter talks to one person who says, yeah, the numbers are the way they are because that's how the conditions are. I mean, just check this. Check this story out. Check out this story. See what kind of truth we find out.
Tonight, a volunteer school guard is recovering. We're told that he was attacked today by students at Mandarin High School as he was trying to break up a fight, and it was all caught on camera.
That security guard was rushed to the hospital with a head injury. Tonight, News4Jax reporter Corley Peel spoke with the woman who saw that fight. She joins us now live with what that woman said. Corley?
The parent tells me she was picking up her child from school whenever she witnessed the fight right outside the main office. She says a volunteer security officer tried to break it up, but instead the students turned on him. This fight at Mandarin High School, captured on a student's cell phone, injured 2 staff members and sent one of them to the hospital Friday afternoon. One parent who wishes to remain anonymous says she saw the whole thing.
And I went up to the window to see, and sure enough, there was kids in a fight and a brawl, but one of the student aides came running into the office yelling, "There's a teacher down there hitting on the security officer."
District officials told News4Jax the fight started with 2 students and escalated when staff members tried to break it up. The parent who saw the brawl said one of the staff members who got hurt is a volunteer security officer. You can see in this video staff members running in to separate students on the ground who are on top of the security officer. And eventually you see the security officer lying on the ground, unable to move.
And I watched him on the ground, and he was definitely injured. They said yell for an ambulance. He was coughing up blood on the side, and when they went to roll him over, you could see his head was bashed out pretty bad. He was bleeding from the back of his skull as well.
Although it's unclear how many students are seen in the video, the district says the 2 students who initiated the fight will be disciplined.
While there was no criminal intent, this kind of behavior is simply unacceptable at Mandarin High School. All students who were involved will be disciplined according to the Student Code of Conduct.
The parent who watched it all happen says the school needs more security.
I am horrified. I have never out of all the years known Mandarin High to have this kind of, there's just apparently not enough security. Because this student that they did pull, he was quite violent. And if you have somebody that violent that can do that kind of damage to a teacher or a security officer, that's kind of scary.
She says if staff members aren't safe at school, she doesn't know how her children could be. There's no word yet on whether or not this 2 students being disciplined will face charges. We have the uncut video of that fight on our website at news4jax.com. Reporting live, Corley Peel, Channel 4.
This is an average day in schools in Philly, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Memphis, New Orleans, Detroit, Chicago, New York, Boston, Wilmington, Camden. It's a big list. Memphis, New Orleans. Teachers under assault. One of our viewers, one of our listeners to this podcast, they reminded me of this story about the school district, about the school we just learned about, where the teachers were assaulted, where the volunteer security guards were assaulted during a large-scale episode of black mob violence in the school. They go, hey, Colin, they just did a story on this 2 years ago. That's the most dangerous school district in the whole state. But I got a kick out of this because toward the end of this clip, we're going to have somebody admit what we've been talking about here for a long time, which is teachers and administrators are under enormous pressure to keep the numbers down. Because we do not want to criminalize the children. And so when you see this story, think about the numbers, as bad as they are. And think about what they would be how bad they would really be if people told the truth about them.
Arsons, attacks, sex crimes, weapons, just a sample of what is happening inside Duval County public schools.
The I-team spent weeks digging through state data and uncovered that Jacksonville is home to the most dangerous school district in Florida. Investigator Lindsay Gardner's here now and found local elementary schools are subject to the most injuries from fighting. Lindsay?
Joy, we looked at 26 categories of crime, violence, and inappropriate behavior, all tracked by Florida's Department of Education. In the most recent school year on record, that's the 2014-2015 school year, we found Duval County had more than 11,500 incidents of crime, violence, and disruptive behavior. It is a huge problem, and it's just getting worse.
How's the school?
Good. Jacksonville mother Daisy Conway is frustrated and disappointed in the neighborhood schools for her 3 children. Fights like this go viral on social media. Jacksonville students attacking each other on school property.
Somebody need to do something about it. Okay, that's our future here, is the kids.
Daisy Conway tells me she's so concerned about the atmosphere at the Northside schools her 3 children are zoned to attend, she's now busing them to other schools. Conway lives in zip code 32209, home to Northwestern Middle School. The I-team found that's the most violent school in the state for fighting, with 128 recorded in the most recent school year on record. That averages to about 3 fights every week. Nearby George Washington Carver Elementary reported 56 fights that year, which left 26 students injured. The I-team discovered the top 5 schools for fighting behind Northwestern included Jean Ribault Middle with 117 fights, James Weldon Johnson Academic Middle with 112 fights, Jefferson Davis Middle 99 fights, Arlington Middle, 97 fights. We found of the 3,603 total fights across the entire district where 110 students were hurt, 0 were reported to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Instead, all were handled by school district police. Here are some other numbers we uncovered. Duval County reported 6,017 physical attacks. That is where a student is attacked without fighting back. There were 40 sex offenses, 54 sexual harassment cases, 27 reports of weapons in school, and 8 arsons. All incidents primarily handled internally within the district.
It tells me that maybe they need to adjust the code of conduct.
News4JAX crime and safety analyst Gil Smith used to work as a school resource officer here in Jacksonville. He explains Superintendent Dr. Nikolai Vitti recently changed the reporting rules.
That was done to try not to have a criminal record on these kids at such a young age.
Smith admits it may be backfiring if kids think they face little punishment for crimes on campus.
Some teachers complain because a student has to commit several offenses in order to get a suspension from school. So they feel that some of the students feel emboldened that they can misbehave more before they're disciplined.
Former Duval County substitute teacher Kiara Onsley brought a stun gun to her classroom for protection this year. It got her fired.
I definitely want everyone to understand that my intentions were not to hurt their children, the students. I just want them to understand that. I want them to understand that I did it to protect myself. I felt threatened.
The I-team went to Dr. Vitti to ask if Jacksonville schools are dangerous.
Are students safe in Duval County schools?
Absolutely. My 4 children attend public schools. If I didn't feel that our schools were safe, I wouldn't put my own children in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the ultimate testament of my faith in our public school system.
I went through all of this data with Dr. Vitti, and I have to tell you, we talked for an hour candidly, and he seemed to know the story behind every number, every statistic. He tells me he gets weekly reports from each and every school, and if he thinks there's something missing, he presses each school to be more transparent with what is happening. Now, coming up all new tonight at 6, Dr. Vitti tells me if he's willing to make any changes and why he believes it's the State Department of Education that has failed Duval County. Joy?
And it all comes back to the numbers. The bogus numbers. The numbers some people don't know are bogus. The numbers some people don't have the nerve to challenge as bogus. The bogus numbers that are infecting every part of our discussion of this enormous level of black criminality all over the country. The bogus numbers that are supporting the greatest lie of our generation, the greatest hoax of our lifetime, the myth of black victimization. All right, let's wrap up this podcast. But before we do, I know a lot of you guys are listening to this as subscribers, but other people listen to it just on my minds.com/Colin Flaherty site, where I put a link to it. You just click a button and you're listening to this. Some people do that because they don't know how to subscribe to a podcast. Well, it's very, very easy. If you have a smartphone, all those icons, they're apps, right? I mean, you have an app for the weather, you have an app for YouTube or whatever. And and this is the same for your computer. Your computer, whether you're a Mac or a PC, you have an app. You have apps, applications, and you get them basically from the same place. It'll say apps, usually it's something called an app store. You just click on the button, click on the app store, and you'll see 3 or 4 or 5, at least 5 podcast readers, podcast applications, podcast apps. Just push a button and it's on your phone. Push a button, it's on your computer. And when it's installed, all you have to do is look for the little spyglass or magnifying glass. Click on the button. That's search. Search Colin Flaherty, White Girl Bleed a Lot podcast. Boom. There it is. Boom. Hit subscribe. Done. That way you can get these delivered automatically without without trying to dig them up somewhere else. Yeah, let me take care of another piece of business here too. So you guys know we were on YouTube for a long time, and we got kicked off. I lost count 3, 4, 5 times. And over those five times over a 3-4 year period, we had over 100 million views. But most of the views, probably 50 to 75%, depending on the views, they didn't come from subscribers. They came from people who just came in and watched the videos whenever they felt like watching them. And so when we left YouTube, I did a lot of stuff on Twitter saying, hey, we're now on minds.com/Colin Flaherty. I did a couple things, a lot of things on Facebook. I did a big Facebook ad, ran it to a lot of people saying the same thing. But still I get a lot of emails going, Colin, what happened to you? What happened to you? Where are you? So there's a lot of people who think we just disappeared. So when you're out there on the web, when you're out there on YouTube, a lot of people are posting my videos on YouTube, by the way, with my blessing. But when you're out there, just remind people where we are now. Remind people about the videos. Remind people about this podcast. Remind people how we are engaged in a fight to preserve the very fabric of our civilization in the United States. A civilization based on merit, based on work, based on dependability, based on people keeping their word, based on people showing up, working, saving, investing, having a family, and repeating that. One of the things we see in these videos and on these podcasts, they all kind of show the same thing. This fabric is being ripped every day. I don't know how we're going to put it back together. I don't know how we're going to unrip it. I don't know how we're going to mend it. But I know it's going to start by us telling the truth and letting people know about what's going on in a very plain fashion. That's what we do here. We talk about the greatest lie of our generation, the hoax of black victimization, without racism, without rancor, without apologies. And in one form or another, we're doing it every day. We do these podcasts Monday through Friday. And thanks everybody for all the support you're giving me by listening to these podcasts, by telling your friends about them. They're really doing real well. And I think one of the things about a podcast or a video, this is a little news you can use here. If you want to have a successful YouTube channel or a successful podcast, you do have to produce a lot of material. I mean, every day. People kind of have to get used to you. They have to know you're there. I mean, it's the same thing as your store, your corner store. I mean, if it's closed at random times, you're just going to stop going there. They've got to be open 7 in the morning till 7 at night, and you got to know that. Well, that's what we are here. We're here every day. And so the podcast we post our podcast sometime in the afternoon. The videos I can make a little bit ahead of time. The podcast I try to make on the same day. And so sometimes they get stretched out to 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. I try to get it up by 2. Sometimes it goes a little bit later, depending on what's happening in the news cycle. And another thing I want to thank all of you guys for is all the support you're giving to me on a lot of different levels. I mean, all the people who send me videos from their hometown. All the people that send me their stories that I'm compiling in a book. First-person accounts of people's personal experience with black violence, black criminality, black mayhem, whether it happened to them in high school 20 years ago, or whether it happened to their kid or their neighbor or their cousin yesterday. So keep on sending those. And the financial support is also very important, and I'm also very grateful for that. We were on Patreon for a while. I got kicked off that. One line, they didn't really give you an appeal there, right? It's like one line. Dear Mr. Flaherty, you violated our rules against hate speech, i.e. we caught you telling the truth about this ridiculous, biggest lie of our generation. We're going to kick you off Patreon. Same way I got kicked off of YouTube. But our PayPal is still up. And people are very, very generous on PayPal. and Minds.com is set up for that, right? There's a little, when you're watching the video, you'll see some icons. You can just hit the dollar icon and send me $1, send me 5 or 10. And I'm amazed how many people send more than that. Sometimes a whole hell of a lot more. That allows me to do this, knowing that we're not going to get advertisers for this. That allows me to keep going on this, knowing that if I had to take time to write more books, which I want to do, which I'm trying to figure out how to do, then I'd have to cut back on the videos and the podcasts. And these videos and podcasts, these things are like a shot of adrenaline right into the heart of a lot of people around the country. Very rarely do you hear me do the and don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and all that stuff, and you gotta do that. I found that when people listen to these podcasts, or when they watch my videos or read my books, I don't have to tell them to share that, because in lots and lots of cases, I couldn't stop them from sharing it. When I watch other people's podcasts, and really we're not, when you do something like this, we're not just competing with other people on YouTube or other podcasts. I mean, we're competing with national media. We're competing for your attention on lots and lots of levels. That's it. And so, I hear these other people, they have these beautiful voices, no stuttering. There's a little script. They've got all these dramatic skills where they can read scripts and it doesn't sound like they're reading them. We don't use scripts here. I've said that once or twice before, and the great Carl Jogger, the great lawyer out of Pahrump, Nevada, he's like one of the biggest supporters and friends of this channel, and me. And I don't even think Carl believed it till we did a video. Till he was in the area, so we spent a couple days together. So I said, "Hey, let's do some videos." Plop the camera down. Or in a couple places, I plopped my iPhone down. A couple places, pulled out a microphone, and off we went. No script. And so despite all that, despite knowing that this is not, you're not listening to This American Life, a great podcast on NPR. I mean, you guys are still with me on this, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very encouraged by that. But isn't it amazing when you listen to a podcast like Fresh Air, or you listen to This American Life, or Radio Lab, or other ones that I listen to? Every once in a while, they'll read the names of all the people that are involved in that. It's like, oh yeah, we've got Johnny and Jimmy doing the music. We've got Mary and Freddie, doing the. It's a long booking the guests. They got like 20 people working on these things. I'm not going to tell you how many people work on this stuff. Directly work on it, but it's not 20, I promise you. But we're still getting out there. We're getting an audience, because I just don't think we're getting this kind of consistent reporting. We're not getting this consistent plain talking about this enormous problem that you get here. So my big skill on this planet is not my dulcet voice, not my beautiful dramatic tones. My big skill is I am a good reporter. I'm a reporter's reporter. I teach other reporters how to be reporters. Reporters call me. They go, "Colin, how do I do this? Colin, what should I do that?" I got an email the other day. Somebody from, Politico's a big site, so I guess I can say this without worrying I'm going to get this person in trouble. This person got me I've known this person for a very long time. I knew that person like the day they got their first job in journalism. It was basically like it was a file clerk, right? This person wanted to be a big shot reporter. So, as we went, we got to be buddies and whatever, and we talked, and I was just, saying, "Oh yeah, I would do this, I would do that, I would do this, I would do that." And, their career went here, went there, and it took off. Now that person's a big shot at Politico. Anyway, that person sent me an email the other day saying, "Hey, Colin, I found myself doing it again. Every day, I am telling people something you told me." So that's my big skill here, and my big hope is that by being this reporter, connecting the dots, which to me is the most important skill in reporting, connecting these dots the way we connect them, showing you the patterns. I think that's going to have some value to you, not just in helping us expose this great lie, not just in helping us really see what these reporters and media are like when they're in denial, deceit, and delusion about the greatest lie of our generation, but really on another level, and we touched about it a little bit here. I mean, there's a lot going on here where people can use this stuff for their personal protection. God, I just got people send me letters. I get letters. I get a couple letters a day. And sometime in these letters, people are very generous, telling me all these great things about myself, and they're very generous sometimes by putting a little love offering in there. And the guy today said, listen, Colin, you changed my life. You may have saved the life of me and my family. We were going to move into this one neighborhood in this one city. But I'd seen a couple of your videos. It made me read your book. And it made me open my eyes as to what I was getting myself and my family into if we moved into that neighborhood. He calls himself Dr. Anonymous. I'm not sure if he put his return address on the envelope or not. But that's what keeps me going, getting letters. Oh, and he said, but after reading the books and videos, we decided not to go there, and we moved to a whole new state. A state where I can be confident that I can send my kids to school without them being subjected to this ridiculous level of black on white hostility that happens to so many kids, and so many parents don't have any clue about it until it happens to their kid, or until it rises up to a level where you can't ignore it anymore. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening. Your kids aren't that much different than us when we were kids. There's a lot of stuff going on in their lives that they're not telling you. A lot of stuff at school. I mean, not just okay, we talk about the violence and the denial. What about the school books? What about the books? I was over at my friend's house a couple of years ago. Beautiful San Diego, California. I was talking to her son, a liberal. She was liberal, Victoria. And I'm talking to her son. I was very curious what he was learning in school. And he started telling me this and that about the United States is this, the United States is that. And I said, let me guess. Howard Zinn, History of the United States. What's the name of that book? It's it's like the most popular textbook in the country in high school. What's it called? The Unauthorized History of the United States, or the History of the U.S., something like that. This is just one long anti-American polemic, and they sell it as history. I mean, are you reading your kids' books at school? Are you asking them what they're doing for Black History Month? I mean, I understand kids don't want to tell parents what's going on, but I also know the parents have to take an interest in what's going on. These schools, everything's so secretive. I mean, I got a kick out of that guy from Memphis. He let the cat out of the bag, right? Was it Memphis? No, it was not Memphis. Jacksonville, where they talked about Duval County as the most dangerous district in the state. And he said, yeah, a couple years ago we started, we stopped reporting the numbers because we didn't want to criminalize the children. Man, whenever I hear something like that, I don't think of the criminals. I think of the kids, I don't know, 1%, 10%, 50%, 80%, 90%. I think of those kids who are being deprived of an education because these goofy people on these school boards are turning their schools into some kind of social justice warrior laboratory. And now more and more school districts doing restorative justice. One kid beats the piss out of a kid in the bathroom. A black kid will beat the piss out of a white kid in the bathroom. Does anybody get arrested? No. But the school district assures us that we will follow our code of conduct and discipline them accordingly. Well, for a lot of cases now, that means they're going to sit the white kid and the black kid in a room, and we're going to have a little, we're going to hug it out because there's obviously some kind of disagreement here. White and Asian kids are being brutalized every day in schools around this country, brutalized by black people who just are not that into white people. And that's what the schools are teaching. They're reminding black kids every day that the only reason their lives are all screwed up is because of white racism that's been happening for a very, very, very long time. And it's relentless, and it happens all the time and everywhere. And you're never really going to overcome it. So just kind of get what's yours. And if you see any white people and you happen to get into a tussle with them and they end up getting their asses kicked because it's 10-on-1, well, they probably deserve it because they are the beneficiaries of the white privilege keeping you down. You cannot separate teaching this racial hostility with the racial violence that follows. And so now NPR, I want to say they bought into the lie, but that's like understating it by a factor of about 10,000. They just buy into these very, very convenient falsehoods. They spread them around as if they're the truth. Nobody checks them. Nobody at NPR is following Colin's first and only rule of journalism. If your mother says she loves you, check it out. Do we have to make a second rule of journalism now? Do we have to observe the second rule of journalism? We're not really making them up, right? We're just reporting on them. So I guess the second rule of journalism that we see practiced every day is don't make the black kids angry.